Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of It's Your Time You're Wasting. Terry and Olly Talk Teaching with me, Olly Furnival, over here in Japan, where I'm the head of division of an IB school. And
I'm Terry Wood in London. Currently QTS assessor, pathway tutor, and several other things for the Test Institute who operate throughout the UK and abroad now, but I'm based in London. Formerly a colleague of Ollie's in state secondary education for many years. How you
that's
doing,
right.
Ollie? You all right?
And yeah, I'm good, thanks. Had a
Great.
busy couple of weeks since we last spoke at
Oh
school,
yeah.
but it's all going well. How about you?
Always busy. They keep me busy, and I like to keep busy. Still,
Good.
the day will come when I'll say that's enough, but I'm not there yet. Oh,
No, no.
thankfully.
Well, the idea is that we're going to use our joint experience over many years to give advice to people thinking about joining the profession, who've just started, and also experienced teachers who maybe want to hear a couple of oldish teachers share their opinions. And we'd also love you to respond to them. And if you would like to, then please do email us at Terry, it's your time you're wasting at gmail.com.
Right.
Okay, okay, great. So, today's discussion is going to be focused around the rather big story topic of what makes a good teacher. So I'm going to lead off, Terry. I'm just going to ask you some questions,
Sure.
maybe respond to what you're saying, and please do the same for me.
Yeah.
So, going to start today, mate, by asking you what good teachers did you have as a child student and why?
Well, I won't go back to primary school because we're talking 60s, early 70s. That's kind of the dark age. I'll go back to secondary, my kind of Catholic comprehensive in Merseyside. Three people stand out. I'm going to start with long departed guy, Peter Fay, who was the head of lower school. He was the pastoral head of lower school, and he was basically God. I mean, this guy put the fear of God into us. He was the disciplinary body of the lower school in its entirety, with his leather strap and his big voice and his commanding presence. The good thing about Peter Fay was he was a very good maths teacher, as well as having this pastoral role. He was a guy well into his 50s by then, I would imagine. And he was very good at carrot and stick. The
Good.
stick was never far away. You did not want to get on the wrong side of this guy, so he kept everybody together. But when you did something well, as I did, for example, well in the year 7 or year 1 as it was then, maths test, the praise he gave you just
Yeah,
felt so much bigger
yeah,
because of who he was.
yeah.
And that stuck with me. That carrot and stick. There's got to be some level of fear, if we can call it that, without overdoing it. But when the praise comes, it's got to be meaningful. That would be my first. Do you want to throw over to one of yours?
Yeah, no, I just think that's a great example of having a teacher where the students want to do well for them.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't just because of the fear factor, but it's like, well, I want to impress this person. I think, yeah, if a teacher can get that in you, that's excellent. The nearest similar one out of my three to that would be a teacher called Mr. Wells, who
Right.
the reason I've chosen him was for his eccentricity. He was a secondary school teacher at the secondary school I was at a student. And he was not in any way a physically, scary person, but similar to your example, was someone that you just didn't mess with. But Mr. Wells was great because he would, during his history teacher and during class, he'd just take his shoes off, take his sock off and clean the board of his sock. And you didn't know whether to laugh or not, and he kept you guessing. So I've not done that in my career, but I've thought about be a little bit eccentric, get the students guessing, and I think that was really good. Mr. Wells, incidentally, when I was in the sixth form, called me both the immaturest sixth former we've ever had at the school, and also told me I should become a teacher. So the way, as you say, the carrot and stick, the way he could make you feel one way, and then actually, because of your communication skills, I think maybe you should think about going into the
Mm.
profession. So for the eccentricity, I'd like to nominate Mr. Wells. Still remember him very well, and I actually worked at that school. And in my office, when I was in a sixth form, a student had written on the wall, Mr. Wells lives here. And I don't know when that was written, but he was long gone by then. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting guy.
I think you have carried a few of your own eccentricities into the job. I think that was always one of your great strengths. You stood out for that reason. Yeah, my second with two people who worked very closely together. A few years later, I got into the sixth form, doing one of my A levels, and of course, eventually my degree was geography, A level geography. Two young teachers, male and female. I think it was Tina Wright. I could be wrong. I apologise if I got that wrong. It was definitely Paul Rafferty. They were probably only be mid-20s. And we're talking very early 80s now, 82, 83. They kind of brought a modern feel to a school that was quite traditional in lots of ways. It was the first time I felt I was treated like a student rather than a pupil, if you know what I
Important.
mean. There was more kind of give and take. They would listen to what we wanted and what we thought would be good to do as far as school trips were concerned and audio visual stuff. Um, yeah, they modernized the subject. They made geography, which was always obviously a big favorite of mine, even more interesting. They were
Excellent.
relatively fresh out of university with their own geography degrees. But I think it was the significant difference between the old kind of post-war approach of Peter Fay and this pair of very young geography teachers. And I think in my career, I think I've always tried to do both.
Yeah,
It's
I think
only
you
when you
have.
asked me this question, to think about this question the other day, I realized that for both, I've taken from both those really different approaches in my own career. Yourself?
I think you have. Yeah, I think you have. I won't forget one of the first times I saw you. We we used to do cakes on a Friday, the
That's
humanities
right. We
department,
did. Yep. Yep.
and yeah, I was probably still either trainee teacher or an NQT because I did both at the same school. And I remember, I don't remember the student's name, but he just bowled into the classroom at lunch, uninvited, as though he owned the place, and the look you gave him, and then he knew that what he'd done wrong, and you didn't even have to say anything. And I thought, oh, that's how you do it. I remember that from a couple of teachers. So yeah, saw that from you in my very early days. The second one, again, history. You can guess the subject I liked at school, Mr. Wright. And
Hmm.
the reason was the way he could give, but then make you feel that you've done wrong. So I remember once I think just before GCSE, I'd written a diary as a member of Hitler Youth, and he said, I'm not going to say who this is," and he read it out, and I realised, oh God, that's mine. And just the way he did it made me feel really good about myself. I had him for A level history, and by then, as Mr. Wells said, I was, you know, bit of an idiot. And I actually scored the top grade in class on the reunification of Italy essay, and I got the top grade, an A or whatever. And he gave it all the results, and I danced around like an idiot, being top of the class. And then he just came over quietly and said, "You're never getting a top grade again if you act like that." And I really thought, oh, yeah, I'm a bit of an idiot. I know. I think I've let him down a bit because I was, just being a bit silly with it. And he didn't shout that. He just came and told me nice and quietly, "Well, I'm not going to do that again if that's how you're going to react." So, yeah, Mr. Wright. Luckily enough, when he's passed away, but when I first became a teacher in England, I managed to see him once back at the school, and I told him, and we kind of spoke about old times. He said, yeah, you let yourself down a few times, but he was really happy that in the end I had become a teacher. So yeah, just the way without any, song and dance, whereas I
Yeah.
might have, shouted that student down in my early days. He didn't need to do that at all, and it was great.
Good. Well, got a nice selection there.
Yeah. Have you got another?
No, I've got they're the three that stand out. Yeah, they're
Okay.
the three.
Well, just the one I want to talk about, which also it's really weird. I'm going to Mr. Wettle. Now, Mr. Wettle's still
Okay.
around, and this was
Okay.
at the same school, and he was head of year seven. He was the PE teacher, head of year seven that everybody wanted to be.
All
He was
right.
at the school for 30 odd years, and really something really strange. I don't know why this stuck with me, but in year seven, we'd have had the equivalent of PSE, and the police came in, and there's been a few troublemakers in the local town. Nothing to do with me whatsoever. And the way the police said it, and the way Mr. Wettle spoke to a couple of lads who were the bad boys in the year, and the way he kind of said, "Yeah, listen to this. I kind of know what you do out of school." That the pastoral side he showed there, I don't know why at the age of 11 or 12 that stuck with me. the way that he let the kids know that he knew, and without causing again any fuss, just a little nod to the lads who it probably could have
Mhm.
been. It was excellent. And when I went back to teaching that school, he'd retired, but he was still an invigilator, and I was the DP coordinator. So I purposely made sure that I invigilated with him in the big exam hall for an IB exam. And he didn't know I'd done it on purpose, but I thought, yeah, nice one. I'm going to invigilate with the guy that I wanted to be when I was 12 years old. So yeah, and he's still
Good,
around me. So well. Lovely bloke.
good, good story.
Cool. Right. So some nice memories, and hopefully, yeah, listeners, you can see how maybe we've seen things as teachers and tried to take a few on of them ourselves.
Yeah, well, you did.
So, yeah, I want to move it on now, Terry, and just think about, we're both well into our careers now, but I want you to think about what have you learned over your career that you'd tell your younger self about being a good teacher.
Yeah, I did say it's a tricky one. There's several things, but I think the one that stands out, it kind of overlaps with what we talked about when we last spoke about why become a teacher, and that is don't be too quick to get out of the classroom. There are a couple of reasons for that. We did say, didn't we, that it takes different types, and some people are more bound for management, and good luck to them, and others are more about the classroom. I think, in general terms, just stay as long as you can and master the craft of the classroom. Don't be so keen and eager to leave that behind. Like a lot of teachers, when they get older, maybe late 40s into 50s, if they're still teaching, they retreat back into the classroom, and that
Mm.
probably tells you that that's where they were supposed to be anyway. There were many and different reasons for getting out of the classroom very quickly, but that would be the big one for me. And I did manage broadly to do this. I'm happy to say, until I did eventually leave, resist the temptation to leave the classroom too soon. That would be my number one. You?
Excellent. If I look at myself in my very early days, I guess, and again, don't embarrass you, but I remember you telling me very early on that I was reacting to everything when I didn't need to. And I think I took it too personally at first. So I'd like to say, don't take it personally if a student isn't interested in your subject or they've got other things going on that you might not know about. Or the fact that, what I took personally was I spent hours planning these lessons. It was a new subject, citizenship, it only in its second year. So I didn't really we didn't have that many, unit plans, even established. The internet was around, nothing like it is today, but it wasn't that much to go on. So I'd have to basically create from scratch. And then you must have overheard or something, but me reacting to everything where a student maybe didn't do the work or answered back. And yeah, you just had a quiet word and said, don't react to everything. They'll know you're doing it. You'll become a target for that because some students, me, I was a bit silly at school, but I was always fearful of being in trouble. So if a teacher put their foot down on me, I would stop and move in shape. But not all students that we've taught, and I'm sure still today do that. So yeah, the thing I'd probably first tell myself is learn how and when to intervene because I think I and some other teachers who are new to the profession maybe think, oh, I've got to have complete control. I've got to be the teacher who everybody looks up to, and that's not going to happen at first. That's going to take a good few years in a school for the students to look at you that
Yeah.
way, and you've got to earn that respect.
Yeah, there's no Peter phase anymore. The world has
No,
moved on, systems have moved on. The things that Peter would have done that were perfectly acceptable a long time ago are no longer seen as acceptable.
no.
There's many different ways of skinning a cat, to pick out the wrong phrase, but never mind. Uh, yeah,
Okay, great. So let's think about, I mean, look, the job of a teacher is so diverse, and we'll go through that in our series. But what 3 points can you name and elaborate on that you believe makes a good teacher? We could maybe do one after each other. But yeah, what 3 points could we think about that
well,
makes a good teacher?
I'm going to go. It's funny enough, what you've just said. Don't be the adult. Don't take it too personally. Take it serious, but not too personally. Um, in all interactions with students, which is mainly your day-to-day life, obviously there's lots of adults around you and colleagues, but it's
Mm,
mainly about being with kids. You have got to be the adult. You've got to rise above things, and that can be hard to do for a young person. And you must never take the interactions with kids whether it be about their lack of work or love for your subject or behavioral issues personally, they are not going home at the end of the day thinking about you and ruining their evening.
So
Whilst
true.
well, you probably will lie
Yeah,
awake in your bed saying, I got that wrong. Those kids hate me. They are not doing that. So that
so
would be
true.
the first one for me. Be the adult, rise above it, and don't take it too personally. Yours?
No, yeah, totally agree with that. I'm actually saying similar to a teacher I'm working with at the moment who's having a bit of trouble with a couple. And it's, not good that he's, especially the ringleader's doing it with others, but it's really important that we have that open communication so teachers know who's doing what and why. And I'm actually doing a follow-up behavior meeting this week on that. So my first one, some links would be communication. A good teacher has good communication skills. Um, we have to bounce from year 7 to year 12 to parents to the head teacher to department meetings, to being on duty throughout the day. And I think when I talk about communication, that's a massive part of the job, learning to communicate with a wide range of people, most importantly students. Just because we might be good at our subject, we might have done well at university, the good teacher knows how to communicate with the student. And in that, I would say listen, because we can learn a real lot if we listen to the students. When I was young in the job, I had a student who was not, she wasn't being well behaved in my class. And we had detentions. And yeah, I don't know why, but it just came to me to just talk it through with the student. And yeah, she wasn't perfect afterwards, but the difference was great. I think listening to students, and also listening to other colleagues, which I will talk about in my third point, is essential. And I think with the communication, as you've alluded to, is you need the authority, and you've got to have those boundaries, but you need to be approachable to students, that they feel, okay, I can go and speak to this teacher if things aren't going well. And I've heard from my career how important it is that you're approachable to parents as well, because students might twist things when they talk. If they're expecting a bad report or a bad open evening, they might twist what you're going to say. So parents might come to see you with preconceived ideas of who you are. So I think it's really important to be approachable. So I'd put it under the umbrella of a good teacher and these good communication skills.
Yeah, I'm going to jump to something really quite different, and that's about you've mentioned organization and communication, but you need to be organized and you need to plan ahead. Don't be one of those teachers that lets the term happen to them, who
Yeah,
never looks at the calendar, doesn't realize that next Thursday they're going to be there late because it's an open evening or parents'
yeah,
evening. He doesn't know when the kind of dates are for delivering latest reports and drop down
yeah,
assessment scores. All a bit chaotic. It will swamp you.
yeah,
And unfortunately, some school leaders often their hands are forced. Often it might be they're not as organised or communicate as well as they should. They're often changing things last minute,
oh
and
yeah,
you can get yourself into an awful pickle unless you're constantly looking several weeks. And I always at the start of every half term, had whether that was 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it was, I would always have my half-term plan with all the major events built in, and therefore I was always looking as much as I could several weeks ahead and seeing the problem coming down the road. I in my job now obviously deal with a lot of teachers who are wonderful with the kids in the classroom, probably far better than I ever was naturally, but they're not organized. They
no,
take a lot of organizing and they soon get swamped. And it's the getting
yeah,
swamped is the thing that kills them, not
yeah,
actually what's going on in the classroom.
totally agree. And yeah, I mean, at the moment when I line manage quite a few teachers, I like to think I'm very forgiving and I'll adapt. But one thing that does get me is teachers who haven't read the emails or haven't read it properly, and they've then got it wrong, and then of course it's someone else's fault. So yeah, I really agree on the organisation, and yeah, they end up getting swamped when they've got the assessment due dates that we can't budge on. We're like, if especially if it's external ones as well. So yeah, totally agree on that. And that's for some, I think, something that we'll come on to what can be learned, but I think that's something are going to have to learn if they're not used to. As you say, the first half term with all those things going on, you need to have it planned out. Um, my second would be a good teacher has to be passionate. I
Mhm.
think, rightly or wrongly, we've got to, if we're looking me and you, we're 11 to 16, 11 to 18 age, those days are gone where we're just going to, not that we ever had them as a teacher, but we probably saw them as a child where, yeah, you expect the kids to just sit and work for an hour. You've got to be passionate about your subject. You've got to sell your subject. And I mean, it's important to me, as I say, I was a new subject and it was a subject where some would say, well, why are you trying to tell me about human rights? Like, it's not, it wasn't a traditional at the time subject like maths or history or whatever. But I have seen in my career, some teachers don't look like they're enjoying it. And I think we're both lucky. We both love our subjects, but you've got to really show the students that you're in there. You've got to bring that lesson alive with passion. Whether that's a Monday morning when your football team's lost at the weekend, you still got to put that on for the students. Even the last, the grey days in November, I think a good teacher really goes into every lesson as though that's the first. And sometimes in schools we've taught that lesson four times that week, depending on how the timetables are split up. But it's got to be the passion because I think that would go a long way to the students thinking, oh well, the teacher cares. It's going to bring me along for the ride.
Yeah, well, snap. That's exactly my third I've written down here. Champion what you teach as far as you can. The kids will detect very quickly if you're going through the motions.
Mm,
Um, it isn't always easy. But going back to the two people that inspired me, they came in with that approach. It was we're going to do our best to modernize this subject
brilliant.
away from the very traditional. I mean, obviously they were governed by the exam curriculum, the A level at the time,
Sure.
but to get away from the capes and bays geography to some extent, although that's still important. And so championing your subject, the kids will detect it very quickly if you're just going through the motions. And guess
Yeah.
what? They'll just go through the motions too.
Well, it goes back to what you were saying about organization. We as teachers, that's what we do. We expect that to be done on time. We expect students to meet deadlines. So if we can't, why
Yeah.
should they? And the same goes with the passion. If I don't care about the subject, why should they? I've got a teacher in my school at the moment who's having a few, she's having a few issues with you know, some classroom management, but I can see the passion. She loves her subject. So she's got that. And I think that will, and I'd say to her, that's important. That's going to win them over.
Yeah.
Um, my turn. The
Yeah, your
last one
last
for
one.
me on this is a good teacher asks for and takes on board feedback. Now, there are wrong ways to do this. If you're new to the profession, oh, why don't you like me? Or what can I do better to a class of 30 students? You're gonna get all sorts, and yeah, don't do that. Don't give yourself the runaround there. However, I think when my first point on this is talking to colleagues, talking to TAs in the classroom about, well, what did I do? And take it on board. As I've already said, I learned a couple of things from you, and I've learned a lot. If I call myself a good teacher, it's because I've remembered things from more experienced people who've either popped in or I've gone to and take on board feedback. But the problem can be that it's quite a personal job. Being told in this job, well, actually, you could do this or that better when we attach ourselves to our lessons. That's quite personal. So it can be a bit of a chance you're taking with a colleague. And but I believe that you will learn and you'll become a better teacher if you ask for it at the right times and take on board feedback. And going back to the students now, that can be done in different ways. You could do end of term surveys about what you liked and different liked about the topic, the activities you did. It shouldn't be done on the spur of the moment when you're emotional with them. It should be done as a step back for you to get feedback on how the students as a whole have felt that unit went, because there can be times when we miss a trick with a unit or a lesson or a topic or how we've delivered it. And yeah, look, these are the people learning it. So I think we should learn, ask for and take on board feedback, but in the right way.
I totally agree. I mean, obviously, in my job as a pathway tutor, QTS assessor, I'm the outside,
Mm,
supposedly expert coming in to give that sort of generic or specific advice. It's usually taken on board very enthusiastically. But then again, I have a very different relationship than the guy or the lady teaching in the next classroom, who
sure.
you may look at as a young teacher and think, well, you've told me I should be doing this, but you're not really doing it. And
Yeah.
there's all that sort of dynamics can happen. And I do see that myself when I go into schools occasionally, where the advice streams and the systems are not equitable and they've not been thought through enough.
Mm.
But it's vital, and you know, we're all human. It's very very
Yeah.
hard to take on even constructive criticism
Yeah.
about something that you're invested so emotionally often
That's
in.
it. That's
But
it.
without it, we just don't move forward.
That's it. And fresh eyes on it.
Yeah,
You can see. So, I mean, I've had in my early days, especially early days with the classroom management. Yeah, I went to people above me, and you've got kind of put it out there. But 9 times out of 10, the response is going to be understanding, and you're going to get the good advice. So
yeah,
difficult, but I think it's important in the step.
great.
Okay, so I know we may have covered a couple of these, but my next question for you is what common, especially in your role where you're in the heart of this far more than I am, but what common problems or mistakes do you see new teachers encountering when trying to be a good teacher, and what advice would you give for these?
Yeah, I think probably not. I've got again three here. One is don't believe you can teach. I think we have covered this. Don't believe you can teach everything. One of the hardest things for any teacher to learn, it can take a couple of years at least, is to be selective and intelligently selective in lesson content. Once teachers start to realize that they're aiming for impact rather than filling every lesson or over, you never want to be caught out with. I'd always say to people, make sure they're busy. The worst thing you can ever do is not have enough things for the kids to do, even the really good kids. The devil
Yeah,
will make work for idle hands. So that's rule number one. But you can go the other extreme and just overload them in a cognitive fashion or simply in a working fashion. Um, Getting that balance is very, very, very hard, and it's not the number one thing, but it's up there in the biggest issues I see, certainly in the very early days of teaching. Again, you can learn by watching others. You can learn by
yeah,
having other people look at your lesson plans and so on. But that would be number one for me. You've got to be brave enough to really drill down into what is absolutely essential to deliver, to stay with, and when you actually can move on. And when I see people after a year or so in the classroom, and I'll ask them at the end of the lesson, I didn't, the plan's not quite the same as you delivered. They'll say, yeah, I realized that I didn't have to cover this. I
yeah,
checked that the kids had made the required progress. I skipped a bit. I went for something more impactful. And then I know they're making it. Then I know they're really they're really getting there. So that would be number one for
excellent,
me.
excellent. Yeah, no, that's vital, and kind of maybe on similar lines, but yeah, I think the although I've said this communication is so important, a mistake I see with some newer ones or have seen in my career is trying to be something that you're not.
Yeah.
Trying to copy the
Yeah.
teacher that you think the students need you to be. And I think it can be an easy thing to do as a teacher. When we start teaching, we go to our practicums and we watch others, and of course we should be taking that on. However, we must make sure that the kids know we're not trying to be someone else, and we're not trying to be someone we're not, because they'll see through it very, 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 very quickly. And also, you're going to send yourself down areas where you may not be able to get it back from. So I think that a common mistake I would see, and I have seen, is people trying to be someone else, even on the same staff when they're not. You've got to find your own personality, let that come through. And obviously the old adage that the old "don't smile till Christmas." There is some truth in that, where you've got to wait, see, work it out. Whereas probably I include myself in this rather than rushing in. Well, this is my class. Whereas well, who are you? Kind of thing. Don't then try to be someone you're not. So that'd be my first mistake I see, common mistake I see with teachers.
Yeah. Well,
You,
strangely, I've got written down here, don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to be too friendly. You are in loco parentis, of course, formally and officially. But for a young teacher, you can't really play that role you're in your 20s, let's say. You're not their brother, you're not their sister, you're not their friend. The nearest you should get is the friendly and amused auntie or uncle. I've always thought about this.
Yeah,
what is the relationship, kids? Friendly, strict when you need to be, um, but amused by it all, actually, auntie or uncle. And if anybody's got somebody like that in their life, they'll understand that that's the way to go. But you are not their friend,
no,
and they don't want you to be. You never will be. They may express, particularly very young children, how much they love and care about you. You'll see this in primary schools, of course, a lot.
sure.
They're too young to understand what they're saying. With secondary kids, they don't, nor should they. That's not your job, and that's not the role.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's finding that balance. And yeah, it's all about, as you say, trying to be accepted, but there's wrong ways to go about that, and that's trying to be overly friendly. I think the second thing I'd say are common mistakes I've seen in new teachers is not changing when things don't go wrong. Now that isn't just new teachers, and I'm sure I still carry on some of that myself, but I have seen over the years where an activity that hasn't worked or a behavior strategy you've tried that hasn't worked and you just keep repeating it as if you're going to think one day that student's going to come in and say, oh, they've shouted today, or oh, they've threatened to move me 57 times and they haven't yet.
Yeah.
You've got to be decisive in the job. So if something's not working, don't be scared to bin it, to change it. And I'm talking about classroom activities, but I'm also talking about the way you are with students, the way you are as a colleague. It's think, you might think, okay, great, I've got to July, student X, Y, and Z, they've gone now, I won't teach them next year, but the X, Y, and Z are going to come back next year with the same students. So unless you can get the strategies to deal with that, or to deal with that kind of class, academics, behavior, whatever, you're going to have problems. So I think to sum up, yeah, don't keep flogging a dead horse. If something doesn't work, swallow your pride. Doesn't work, move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got one last one. One
Yeah,
last one for me is don't get siloed, to use a phrase, in particularly again in secondary, in a department. Yes, you've got to
right.
become an integral part of the department. You're going to be spending, particularly the big departments like maths, English, and science, sometimes PE, often. You're spending a lot of time with the same people, taking on their views and ideas and ways of teaching because that's the way it should be. But you've got to break out from that as much as you can. Go and interact with other departments, other styles of teaching, other teachers, other young teachers across the school, because there is a sense of security of being very much part of a department. But
Yes.
sometimes you can get led astray, and you can fail to see what's going on elsewhere that may also be very good and that you can benefit from. And I think a lot of teachers, young teachers, tend to fall into that trap, and they'll get 2, 3 years in, really struggle within one particular department, never have branched out to find out there are other people out there that can help them, and then before you know it, they've left. So
Interesting.
don't get silos, if you understand
Hmm.
what I mean, excessively.
Yeah, interesting. I remember going to my first school that we worked at together. Yeah, couldn't believe at first, totally, totally new to the profession, how departments were cut off from each other and how much that was and how they had their own territory in the school, even people sat in the same place in the staff room. Yeah, it was a real eye opener. I didn't think I didn't really have any idea of what it would be like, but I was like, oh, right, wow. I haven't seen a maths teacher in 3 weeks. If you're not seeing them in a staff room, then, and yeah, you're right, you're missing out on different ideas. And, I never worked in a bad department in the school, but if you do, then yeah, you're right, you could get sucked into that. Okay, I'm going to move on and just think about so obviously in our profession we've got the main three people that we deal with whether that be students, parents, and colleagues.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just want to know what attributes does one need to be a good teacher in dealing with three quite different people with maybe different needs, different understanding of who we are and where we're coming from, and have heard different things as well.
Yeah, well, you've got to do your level best to see the world as other people see it. Dealing with those three groups can be very, very different.
Yeah,
Even, when well, I'm sure at some point in the future we'll talk about parents' evenings and what we learn from them.
sure.
Sometimes the dynamic between children and their parents can be surprising. The relationships aren't always as straightforward as you think. What the
No,
kids are taking home and what they're saying might not always be the truth. So it is a minefield. I certainly thinking about kids and their parents, and this is in the state, the 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 state system as well as it is in the private system. They are your customers. They are the taxpayers. They're sending their children to you. They're entrusting you with their children. Treat them, for pity's sake, with respect. Parents can be difficult to deal with, but they do have a point of view. They do have a point of view, and that's got to be listened to. Let's not forget often that some of our students that struggle with education in various different ways come from families with several generations of struggle in education. When that parent has to go back to the school for the umpteenth meeting in which things have gone wrong with their child,
yeah,
already feeling insecure and kind of threatened, they're often going back to a place that they didn't like and that didn't serve them well and that they couldn't wait to get away from. Sometimes it's the same school building
it
because they
is.
stayed in the same area at the same time. Anybody that doesn't have that understanding really shouldn't be in the profession. Some, parents' evenings, I always say to young teachers, yes, you've got to convey grades and assessment levels and all of that. Close the laptop and just tell them, particularly those that are more vulnerable, what is he or she doing well? Are they working hard? Are they trying? Are they behaving themselves? Are they getting better? Are they getting better? That's sometimes all they need to hear, that little bit
Excellent.
of promise. So fully respect your customers, even if we don't call them that, because that's what they are.
Mm.
Yeah, and one final thing I'll say is that I go to, obviously in my role, I could visit 3 or 4 or 5 schools a week, and I'm always in the school reception area, getting myself signed in, DBS is being shown, all of those things. So I see how people get treated, parents coming in, particularly in primary schools with their children, people visiting to drop mail off, work people working on the building site, whoever it might be, including me. I can very, very quickly see how people are treated in that school. I can thin
Right.
slice.
Yeah.
If you as a teacher have got to treat the site staff or the people working in the canteen for 2 hours a day at exactly the same way as you treat the head teacher,
Yeah.
there's got to be that, and any lower level of respect than that will lead to problems. So
Yeah.
slightly rambling. Don't know if it's
Ah,
exactly
it's
what,
fantastic.
but
And
that's what
people are
I
going
see.
to learn, people, listeners are going to learn a lot from that. Yeah, I really like the point you made about parents coming back to the place perhaps they didn't have a good time in a parents' evening. Yeah, as an early form tutor, yeah, some of the ways I saw students and parents interact was a real eye opener. And also some of the ways the parents would say how they wanted their child to deal with an issue in front of me, which was blatantly against the school rules. So having to deal with that, I always think it's important. I remember being told once by Anne Nelson, who unfortunately has now passed, and she was the London Borough head for Gifted and Talented, the More Able, and I was the school lead teacher for that. And
Yeah.
she made a point really quickly to me about suddenly when we get to secondary, the praise just drops off.
Mm-hmm.
Primary, it's star of the week, it's everything, it's led us home. And parents in secondary tend to only, not always, but more often than not, hear the bad things. So I like what you said about are they doing well at the parents' evening? And I always made it a big point to say to parents, as a form tutor, I always did start boy and girl of the week till the day they left. I don't care how embarrassed they were, a quick email home. And when you get their thank you cards and they leave, the parents mention that, and the parents really like that yeah, oh, maybe my son or daughter isn't going to be the next prime minister, but so what, they've improved this term, they've shown a different side to themselves. And yeah, I think talking to parents like that is invaluable, and learning using parents evenings to learn a bit about the parent, learn a bit about the child. I had a girl in my one of my forms that quite a difficult student, not so much with me because I was a form tutor, but the family had had a lot of difficulties with other siblings in the school. And I just made an she was quite coldish in the early parents' evenings. And once I just made an off the cuff remark about her take that jumper. and her face lit up. And oh, we're going to take that next week. We've seen him so many times. Honestly, from then on, she was completely different with me because I just asked one thing about something not to do with school, and I still remember that. We're going back 15 odd years about
Well,
that. So it really,
it goes to that point. Sorry, Ollie. It goes to that point that a lot of children, and less obviously to a lesser extent their parents, but certainly children think that at the end of the school week, you sit at your desk, the caretaker comes along, the site manager comes along and puts a
yeah,
sheet over your head, and then
yeah,
whips it off first thing on Monday morning. I mean, here I am. The number of times that I've had, certainly when I was living up in the north in Southport, and the pupils were, we saw you at the weekend, sir. You were
yeah,
coming out of a
brilliant.
pub. You were coming. I mean, I was seen coming out of so many pubs. It's not true. Often that was
Yeah,
definitely the case. And they see you as an individual, as a
yeah,
person, as not just the teacher, and that can apply particularly. It can apply to parents too.
yeah,
That you've got to develop a slightly bigger picture than just the teacher, and those minor
definitely,
things can do it. Yeah,
definitely. No, really good example. Thank you. So this is a difficult one. A
yeah.
good teacher's, or an interesting one. A good teacher's born, or a good teacher's made, or is it 50-50? Which parts do you think come naturally? Yeah, answer that, and then if you follow up with, I've got a follow-up question with that. But yeah, a good teacher's born or made, Terry.
I think both. And undoubtedly, I couldn't give you a proportion. I suspect 30% born to do something like that with kids, just great with kids, just great at communicating, conveyed enthusiasm naturally to younger
Yeah,
people, all of those things. Understand them, probably about 30 to 40%. And I think the rest, 60 to 70%, you can make a good teacher. You don't have to come in with
yeah,
all the raw materials. I very much would put myself in the second category. I think I became a good teacher in most respects. Was I born to do it? No, I don't think so. I don't think that was the case. I would hate, I wonder, I mean, when I did my PGCE up in Liverpool in the late 80s, I got some feedback which just induces horror. I still remember what I was told and what was written following a couple
right.
of lesson observations. I mean, just not great, just not great in the very early days.
Yeah,
But I became a good teacher. I think that's true enough to say. Maids, yeah, you know it when you see them. I go, as you know, my job. I go into classrooms all over London and the southeast. I only have to be in there for a minute, and there's just an intangible thing between a teacher and the kids, whatever stage of their
yeah,
career they're at, particularly with new people, young people. It's just there, and
yeah,
then you'll see all the reasons it is there. But sometimes people don't have that, but they still make good teachers because
yeah,
they're diligent and they learn and they work hard and they
yeah,
provide other things that maybe the all singing, all dancing, natural can't provide. And it's very rare to get everything in place. And I will say that I think, to mention a dear departed friend, Dave Thompson, who we
yeah.
both work with, the first one that drops into my mind when I think about somebody born to do it, I
Yeah.
think of Dave. Don't you?
100%. Yeah, so I think what maybe you're getting, well, what I would get from Dave Thompson would be, I was in the same department, we both were with him, and I'd go into the classroom, maybe at beginning or start of a lesson or form room, and yeah, he could respond to five different student quips straight away about five different things, put them in line, have a laugh, help them out, boom, 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 and you would have thought that was a script from a show, but it was just natural. And yeah, I think that for me is what maybe it would be that was born to do. That the relationship, the respect from the students. Yeah, I think
Yeah, but
as you say,
yeah, I think we should emphasize to anybody that may be considering professional, maybe in the early days and struggling, stick at it. You don't
yeah,
have to be born to do it because let's
no,
face it, in any walk of life, who's born to do it?
no.
It's just not the
No, and I
case.
think I
If
think I agree. I think there's some things that come easier. If we ask 100 different teachers, we have 100 different things that came
Yeah,
easy and 100 of different things that took a lot more work for teachers to do. And yeah, I think it's something that I agree with you. It's something that there are natural ways that we as teachers can get on with younger students. However, that's not going to get you through a term, just being able to have a bit of wit about you. There's 101 different things that, you will never have done before that you're going to we all have to start from scratch in the job. Um, so yeah, just kind of linked to that. My follow-up was, do you think there's a time limit roughly on how long you need to teach to be a good teacher? I'm talking about in the classroom now, not the other parts of the job, but is there a time limit to your actual teaching, you
Well,
believe,
it's,
before you
strangely
can
enough,
say I'm good?
I think obviously here in Britain to reach QTS, qualified teacher status, you've got to be in the classroom for 2 years. So the people I assess have got to show in contrasting schools 2 years, so 6 terms. I think probably about that. I do occasionally encounter people after about a year can have pretty much all the nuts and bolts in place. Clearly young and inexperienced or new and inexperienced. But I think you can. I think 2 years is probably about it in getting to 6 terms and getting to a place that where you're considered good in really quite a complex job. I think if you're asking me about expert, I don't think the 10,000 hour rule, which has been floated for many years now in popular culture, is that far wrong. You know, I did about 27,000 hours because you do about, it's interesting, you do about 1,000 hours a year of an
Right.
average school teaching timetable, isn't it? That's interesting. So you can
Yeah.
look at it years. And I would say probably it took me about 10 years before I really felt I was really on top of just about everything. There's always weaknesses, as we'll allude to
Sure.
later, talk about later. After 27 years, 27,000 years, you're still learning. I mean, I
Yes,
go into schools every week and learn something new. It's great, my job for magpieing and collecting new ideas.
definitely.
But I think to become this is why it goes back to my original point. Don't get out too early unless you're desperate to do, because you may find, you're very good, you get offered jobs as, associate assistant head after you've been in the classroom for 3 or 4 years or something. Great, if that's the way you want to go. But you may, if that takes you away from the classroom too early, you may fracture that pipeline, that process in getting you to that 10 years, where I think you are then able to look at others and be fully on top of what you can do to help them, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the higher you go, sometime you're going to have to be the one reacting to issues in the classroom from others. So I take on board what you say. If you haven't got the nuts and bolts, you haven't got that experience, then you could go, that high is too soon. I think you're going to get found out um, e- eventually. In some case, definitely. Yeah. No, I take on board everything you say. It's really interesting. So how, what parts do you think of a good teacher came naturally to you, and what did you most have to work on in the teaching side?
Uh, I've always been, I mean, I'm lucky enough to have always been good with people. I can pretty much get on with anybody. I can adapt very
Yeah,
quick. I can habituate very, very quickly to changing circumstances, to being thrown in at the deep end. I can learn very quickly. I think that helped. I think I always was wise enough, without ever really thinking about it, to treat the people around me, my colleagues, the kids, the parents, with respect.
yeah,
And the background I came from definitely instilled that in me. I think that was in place from the start. I've always been a well-organized person. Ridiculous. I mean, it's kind of off the scale as the years have gone on. I think being a teacher made me even more organized than I would have been naturally. I was always really organized about planning ahead, about knowing I can't operate in chaos. I'm just not very good at it. And I had to be all I plan and I replan and I write lists. And I'm always thinking ahead about what might be coming. And I think when it came to my subject, I think I do use imagination. I always did. Of course, I taught English as well quite a lot, not quite as much as the geography. And English requires a lot of imagination, often to bring it to
sure.
life. It's a hard subject to teach. Certainly in Britain, to English, to British kids who think they know it all. And I think I always came with the approach that I wanted to be imaginative and to find new and interesting ways of delivering content and bringing different things in. So they would be the things I think that I came with relatively naturally. You?
I found, I think I see the mechanics of a lesson quite naturally. I remember the first time I was ever in a classroom was before I did my PGCE. I did 4 years as an English as a foreign language teacher over here in Japan, and I did my training in London. And you do your couple of weeks, whatever, the pedagogy, etc., and then you give your first lesson, and it's 20 minutes on present perfect. And for me, that was life changing. It was like, oh God, this is what I want to do. And I just found the idea of getting people moving around, getting the learning done, the feedback, I really enjoy. And I think came naturally to me was what what I need to do in a lesson, how a lesson, the natural flow of a lesson. I see a lesson as a piece of art, Terry. I see it as, right,
Yeah.
here's how it's going to work, and here's what I'm going to do. It's going to go wrong many, many times, but I know what I'm going to do in there. And I've always found that interesting. On the spin to that, on the other side of that, I've more learned that. Of course, we all read the same, books, pedagogy in our PGCs, but I'm not the best reader. I'm not the most well read. I found I'd take that and I'd work it out myself, and I'd get all the feedback, of course, like that you do now. But a lot of it I found a lot more natural rather than having to read and copy.
Yeah.
I found I found it quite easy to communicate with students, and some have told me it's because I'm their age level mentally.
Mm-hmm.
But I've found that I've found that what I had to work at was ones who didn't go along with what I was doing.
Yeah.
I found that hard. Well, why not? And I had to work on dealing with the wider range. I think I probably had to work harder at try realizing what you said, the bigger picture of, well, what's this school's place in the community? But we'll come to that maybe in the next part. But yeah, I think for me, I found that the easier parts were actually the design of a lesson. In my head, didn't always work out that way, but I was always willing to try new things. And also, I found the communication with students quite easy. In my role now, I'm more out of the class than in. But when I am in the classroom, bang, I'm back into that mode and absolutely highlighted my week just doing that. I think for me, that's something born to do, maybe too far, but certainly that's my vocation. And I think that's what I kind of found quite
Yeah.
easy to do compared to other parts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well explained.
Um,
I get that.
yeah, thanks. And how about the things you felt you had to work on a bit more than that maybe didn't come
Well,
as natural?
this is easy for me because my job is to, go around observing lessons and commenting all the elements of QTS. I know, I think I probably knew at the time, but I certainly know now after 10 years, I've got great clarity on what I wasn't good at. What was I not good at? I certainly as the years went by and teaching assistants became an important part of what was happening in the classroom. I never deployed them well.
Right.
I
Interesting.
led and they and expected them to follow, and they tended to follow. They got used to my methods, but did I deploy them? Did I liaise with them? Did I give them the set tasks that they really needed from me? No. And I've learned that that was not the strength. I think even more basically questioning. I one of the things I'm constantly making comment on is the quality of questioning.
Mm.
The kind of no hands approach, cold calling, bounce questioning, extension questioning. There's many different skills, and it's a real skill.
I
It's an art
absolutely love
form getting
questioning. Yeah.
questioning right so that all kids are supported and involved. I probably wasn't the best at that. I've got to admit, and that's something I've realised over the years. And again, does anybody ever master this in a big classroom, primary, secondary, adaptive practice? It's I'd not say I just paid lip service to it. I worked hard at it, but I never got as near to mastering it, even after 27 years, as I would have liked. And it's a very, very big part of my job today in assessing people's ability and willingness to do it. And there are some of the people out. I go to a lot of special needs schools, of course, and alternative provision,
Mm.
where the practice is just astounding. The support for individuals is, in the mainstream now, within classrooms, particularly in the special sector, is off the scale brilliant, and it puts me to shame. So that they would be
Love
the
to
two.
see some of that. It's a real interest adaptive practice for me. As I said, well, I had to, well, I did the job of more able,
Yeah,
and ironically, they're the ones I didn't often teach in the classroom because where we worked, being a new subject, we had to fight around to the timetables. So the academic kids did German, and the
yeah.
non-academic did citizenship. So that was good. I enjoyed that. I think what I probably wasn't good at first was getting all to come along with me. As you said, I'm a little bit. I do like to be big and loud in the classroom, and um, I found, look, reflecting back, some of the quieter students might have found overlooked, and it's
Yeah.
like not that I've never a teacher that, oh, let's go to that student. However, I think as a teacher, maybe I was at first I was trying to be too maybe out there or too loud to try to improve. This is important, and maybe I would have found that some of the quieter students in the class and I had to work on really getting them involved and getting them the confidence. And I did that so much that when I realised or worked through that I've really come up with, and we'll talk about teaching methods later, but I've really overly tried to do that now as well. I think something that didn't come naturally to me was I found I'm too specific. I go too far into things. I was spending far too much time on marking. Again, our school did quite well in helping us with that, but at first I'd be sat at home hours and hours over books, and I wasn't doing it that students even I wasn't even at the first checking or had a system where you'd get the feed forward that we do now. Well, how do I know that they've read my comments? How do I know that they're going to respond to it? I found I was doing too much too soon, and found that students weren't always. I wasn't giving time in class perhaps to have a proper reflection because I was always trying to do the next thing. We only have 1 or 2 lessons a week, so I was always go, 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 go without maybe I wasn't so good at taking my time. Right, let's reflect on this. Let's look at what you've learned. Let's look at my targets. Let me try to get into place what I can do with you. And I found what you've spoke earlier that when you start teaching, especially me and you in our school where we had a lot of different classes for a few times a week. It's a lot of work. And I found at first I was probably spending too much time on it at home and drowning a bit. And I remember I did go to speak to a colleague about it who gave me the old, do a checkbox, tick them off. Especially as I did have to become head of department early, very small department, but because it's a new subject, and then within a year or two, I did a more able, which didn't really take me out of the class much, but it was a lot of extra work because we got money from Excellence in Cities. So I think probably I took on a lot, and I probably didn't quick enough ask for help. I just worked, 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 and I was a youngish dad at the time as well. So I think maybe could have stepped back a bit earlier, and kind of, which I try to now place what I've got to do and when. So that
Yeah,
that
there's a big difference between lots of marking and effective marking.
exactly. I
And
wasn't working smart.
that takes a
Yeah,
long time to master. And many of the schools and departments I look at are still they struggle. It's a perennial problem and a struggle related to
cool.
workload as well. Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more things before we
Sure.
wrap up. But I want to know, what do you think being, or how, if you do think so, how's being a good teacher changed since you started in the profession?
Oh, massively. I mean, my first classroom that I ever taught in, and my first employed teacher role back in the late 80s, it was still a chalkboard
Right.
with chalk. That I didn't even have the whiteboards with the marker pens, which came in within the next few years of that. So an interactive whiteboard, forget about that.
Yeah.
My first classroom in an inner city Liverpool secondary school. It was an English lesson I was teaching. Was like there's a pile of 12 battered textbooks. By the way, this class has retired the last two teachers that tried to take them. That sort of thing. So you had to
Yeah.
learn very quickly on your feet. Number one for me is technology. The technology, not some of the use of technology I see in the classroom, whether it's visualizers, interactive whiteboards, you know, little computers that the kids are using, it's changed the game completely. Some
Yeah.
respects, it's made it more difficult, um, but there's so much more that can be done. And really, really good teachers now have to be on top of technology. That would be number one. Again, I mentioned this before, the deployment of other adults. You know,
Yes.
that's become something that never used to exist when I was first teaching. You'd have SEND departments where children were extracted from the classroom for extra English and math support. So I think dealing with TAs is radically different than it was. The adaptive practice, again, I'm going to go back to it. It's now given a much higher priority, as it should. That has changed out of all recognition when
Yeah.
it was literally non-existent when I started. And I think the finally I'd say that this is good and bad. There is a lot more uniformity and rigor in delivering schemes of work within departments across schools.
Sure.
I go to a lot of big London inner city academies and academy chains where to establish they've spent millions on these beautiful new buildings and they need to make sure everything is rigorous, no chances are taken. We talked about this last week. There's not too many mavericks trying to spoil things. Um, it's taken away some of the individuality, I think, which is not
Yeah.
always a good thing. But certainly it supports everybody. There's a kind of more holistic view of getting these kids through school and making the best of them. So I think the definitely the sense of uniformity and rigor in delivering the curriculum
Mm.
is from the days when I was sent into classroom. They said, "You, it's up to you now, mate. Off you go. As long as you broadly cover this stuff, we don't care what you're doing." That can be really exciting, but I think to do that to a lot of people today would be daunting,
Ha.
and I'm not
My
sure as many would cope with that. Maybe,
my uncle is passed now. He's a teacher. A lot on my mum's side of the family are actually.
yeah.
Yeah, he
Nobody in my
told me
family.
that
Nobody,
he
I'm the
told
only one.
me
I'm the only one.
right. Well, actually, his wife, first, second wife, and three kids, all are teachers. But he told me he was an English teacher. He told me that he ignored the national curriculum when it came in because he was too busy teaching English. So take that as you are.
Yeah,
I think I was. I mean, I came in 2002 into the British PGC, so I was kind of on probably the start of the change that you've spoken about. I mean, when my friend had left Japan a year before me, and so I said, any advice on the interview? He just said differentiation, differentiation, differentiation. That was a new kind of thing there. But I totally agree with your point on technology. So I was coming in, there weren't the interactive whiteboards, but we obviously students were now we didn't all have our own computers in England then, but we were going to ICT, etc. So for me, yeah, I mean, that's not my strong point at all, technology. In fact, I make a big deal when I teach now in my school, because in my school now we have bring your own device. I never use computers in my lessons unless I have to. I'm back to paper because I think the kids need the break from it. My
yeah,
lessons, an IB philosophy lesson, so it's not examine, there's no assessment, so I can be a little bit freer on that. But yeah, I think for me the big change would be technology, and also obviously safeguarding. I think of course it
yeah,
was there when we started, but
yeah.
when I was last teaching in England in 2019, when I went back, it was wow. This is quite rightly so. It's absolutely everywhere now in schools, and we
It's
had to
very,
we had to
very,
read the law. And,
very
yeah,
rigorous here now in
yeah,
every facet of the job and everybody employed in and around education. Yeah,
yeah, and yeah, I'm not saying there was that when I started, but nothing like today. So I think that's a big change in being the good teacher, spotting things that perhaps
yeah.
we didn't have enough training on. Well, I know it was a bit after you, but certainly we didn't get enough training on. Well, how are we looking for signs of
There was
of problem?
too much reliance on common sense and instinct, which
Yes,
are good things,
yes,
but too many chances were taken. There's no doubt about that. We probably missed a lot of things back
yeah,
in the day, I would imagine.
probably, yeah. And yeah, just finally, I think you've covered this quite well. But my final question was like, what advice would you give to a new teacher, anyone listening who perhaps listen to some of the things we've said about being a good teacher and thinking, well, I'm finding it hard. I'm quite new to the job and I'm finding being good hard. It's a daily slog. What advice would you give to them, Tel?
You've got to if you can get support in doing this, you've got to and you should be able to, because the job is supposed to be developmental. They're supposed to be developing you. Not you're not just an employee. You've got to be developed. Go and watch other people teach as much as you can,
Yeah.
even if it's a 10-minute drop in to see a plenary or questioning or whatever you feel you're not doing well. Particularly watching people who are good with the kids that you struggle with,
Yeah.
whether it's a discipline issue or it's inspiring them. The great pleasure of my job is that I'm constantly watching good teachers teaching great kids. It's a wonderful job. But
Sounds great.
I'm still learning. I every week, pretty much, I will see something new, and I think, oh, I wish I was still teaching. I'd like to go back and deliver this to a class of mine, which I'm never going to do again. So go and watch other people, ask them politely. There may be a system in the school, and that's great. If there's not, break the mold and ask and get in and watch others. You'll learn so much. And
Yeah.
you'll be surprised. You'll think you know what a teacher's like, and you will be wrong. I promise
Interesting.
you.
Yes. This is very interesting, isn't it? Stuff that you work with, one works with, and then you see them in front of the kids. Like, whoa,
Completely different.
whoa.
Yeah.
I Similar to when I saw you give that look that needed no words to a student. Yeah, a lady who I was friends with, mates with, our first school, and I just walked one time into. She was doing a cover lesson in a science room, an English teacher, and yeah, I saw her with the teacher stare, and I thought, oh, brilliant! I'd love to be able to do that. But yeah, listen, I think you've summed that last answer up perfectly. If you're finding it hard, look around you. There's so much in a staff room. You're going to get so many different examples of age, of ways, of experience, and yeah, I'd say also don't beat yourself up. I did. You do. Oh, why can't I do this? It's a frustrating job because it's quite naive, isn't it, to think like we've got 30 kids, 30 different humans there. Some love the subject, some aren't interested. Some have had a, argument with boyfriend, girlfriend, mum, dad. So you've got to think about all of that as you think, right, okay, it's not me. Here's why it's not going well, and here's what I'm going to try and do to keep working through it, and don't put it all on yourself. But if you are doing things that aren't working, talk to someone, get someone to watch you, and don't be scared to change it.
Yeah. It goes back to that
Cool.
original point, doesn't it? Take it seriously, but not too personally.
Yeah,
Seriously, but not too personally. And I think
I
you'll
think that's
probably find a way of getting it right.
I think that's a very good way to end, Terry. I've enjoyed that discussion, and I hope
Good.
the listeners have too. So I'd just like to say thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe this channel. Share it with anyone you think might be interested. And if you'd like to ask any questions, please email us at itsyourtimeyou'rewasting@gmail.com, and we will be with you again very soon. So thanks for your time today, Tel.
And thank you, Ollie. Great pleasure.
Cheers.
Be here again soon. Bye bye.
See you later. Bye.